Alright, so you want to become the best caster in the entirety of Faerun, the Forgotten Realms, Baldur's Gate. Well, in this video I'm going to show you how to do so. You want to be the best of the best, you want to be la creme de la creme, you want to be the elite amongst the spellcasters, and this is just the right video for you, although a little bit of a disclaimer right here, before we continue. We're not going to be covering everything about magic, because to do so we would have to be speaking about every single little nitpick about the spell classes that we have available on Baldur's Gate D&D. We're not going to be doing such a thing because it would take way too long, and in this video we're going to be discussing about the basics of magic, a little bit of advanced little techniques, and some things that the game doesn't really tell you that you need to be aware of, because yes, there are some spells that you might be using with your character class. Specifically, I'm looking at you, Shadowheart. I'll get to that later in the video, but you might be using spells that are not the most powerful ones, and sometimes they will be spells that you shouldn't be using. So in this video we're going to cover damage, how to deal damage with my spells, how to increase the damage of my spells, where do I get damage from my spells, what is the stat that I should be leveling up to get the spells to be more powerful, how do I increase the hit chance of my spells, spell slots and whatnot. We're going to be covering all of that in this video, just to have in mind that there's different schools, types of magic in this game as well. So there's eldritch incantations, there's elemental magic, there's all kind of different spells and magic that we're not going to be covering in this video because it would just take too long. So first and foremost, let's start with basics. How do I increase the damage of my spells? That is going to be coming from the main stat of your class, and I want to be crystal clear about this. Your damage, spell casting ability, it's always going to come from the main stat of the main class, and the game is going to give it to you right here. For Charisma, it's going to increase the spell casting for bards, sorcerers, and warlocks. And then with Wisdom, we are going to have the spell casting improve for clerics, druids, and rangers. I forgot to mention in here, this affects also for paladins. It's a little bit different. And then finally, Intelligence, it's going to improve the spell casting for wizards. Now that is going to be the spell casting of all of the spells they cast, but there might be some exceptions, and those exceptions we're going to be speaking about them right now. Before though, I want to showcase you properly that when I use a spell with Shadowheart, one of those spells that she's going to be proficient with, she's going to be using every single time her wisdom to cast those spells, because she's a cleric. Will, on the other hand, he's going to be using charisma to cast the spells. Gale, on the other hand, he is going to be using intelligence to cast the spells. And that is always going to be true. The thing is that all of the spells that I have right here, they all have kind of a whole bunch of different things. They have a whole bunch of different effects, and that is what usually confuses people, because it's mentioning a whole lot of different stats. We'll get to that later, but first, there's this spell that Shadowheart has right here. Let's compare those things, shall we? So like I said, the basic damage that I am going to be using with Shadowheart is going to be coming from Wisdom. So when I check my stats, that is my highest stats. But I also have lots of different stats, like for example, Intelligence. And oh boy, I have two different spells right here. I have Guiding Bolts, which, then again, this is using the hit chance that I am going to get, and also the damage, overall damage, the damage modifier that I am going to get from Wisdom. And then I have Firebolt, but this one, on the other hand, this is going to be drawing from Intelligence, as I am about to show you right now. So Guiding Bolts, when I use my Guiding Bolt against Will, it's going to do a calculation of the armor class that enemy has for me to be able to bypass it. And then those extra bonuses that I'm going to be getting to bypass all of that, it's going to come specifically from Wisdom. But oh boy, what happens? I'm using Firebolt. James, didn't you just say that this thing is going to be affecting every single one of my spells just because I'm a cleric? Well, yeah, that is still true. But the thing is that this is a very specific rule, an exception that actually comes with the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons, and you can read on the manual of the game on itself. The game really doesn't tell you that well, and To have this knowledge, you do need to have previous knowledge of the handheld book. Larian has done its best to explain these little things to you, but it's still way too hidden. It is still not crystal clear as it should be. The main reason that Shadowheart has that specific cantrip that is going to be drawing from intelligence comes right here from a racial spell that you can see right here. Whenever you make a high elf, Shadowheart is a high elf. She's a half elf, high elf. A little bit of a tangled situation right there. But if we go over here, you're going to see the description of the cantrip, which could be any of these things that you have right here. Shadowheart just happens to have the firebolt, but it could be chill touch, it could be blade ward, it could be shocking grasp, it could be ray of frost. And it says right here, you know one cantrip of your choice from the wizard spell list. Intelligence is your spell casting ability for the cantrip. Oh boy, and the truth shall deliver us all. The only reason why Shadowheart is using intelligence to cast that spell, even though that she is a cleric and she should be using her wisdom, is because specific little rule, exception to the rule that we have right here. It's something very specific. And basically what that means is that you should never, ever be using Firebolt with Shadowheart, even though that I know you want to. I know you want to be using Firebolts, but the thing is that you're never going to be leveling up intelligence with Shadowheart because clerics are not going to be using intelligence. So as you level up, maybe you could take advantage of this thing at some point when you are just starting out the game. But this is the only rule, exception to the rule, that you're never going to be using as a main means of damage. The one that you are going to be using as main means of damage if you want to deal damage specifically with a cleric, and this is true also for every single class, is going to be the spells that you have right here. And it doesn't really matter if some classes have shared spells, that it might be the case sometimes. But the thing is that the stat is never going to change. This is a hard rule. Gale is going to be using intelligence because he's a wizard. Shadowheart is going to be using wisdom because she's a cleric. Will is going to be using charisma because he is a warlock, so on and so forth. Now we have some little bit more of exceptions as well. You are going to come across these little spells that you have right here. This is a cantrip as well. This is the basic cantrip of the cleric, which is Sacred Flame. And basically what Sacred Flame is that deals damage, radiant damage. And to be able to use this spell, I am going to have to make the enemy do a dexterity saving throw. What that means is that the higher the dexterity of the enemy, the more potent the spell will be on itself. But just to have in mind that the spell power on itself, it's still going to be coming from wisdom. The only difference right here is that the enemy is going to have to do a dexterity saving throw. So if I examine Starion right here, this guy, this is something that you can also do on the battlefield, very much important. This guy has high dexterity, so he's going to have higher dice rolls to bypass my dexterity saving throw with Sacred Flame. Gale, on the other hand, he has somewhat of medium dexterity, he has 14, and if we examine, like for example, Will, right here, we're going to see that he has less dexterity even, but also my main character that I built for different purposes, my main character is going to have 10 dexterity, so it's going to be even more difficult for him to be able to bypass the saving throws for Sacred Flame, meaning that there's going to be a higher chance of me being able to hit that guy, slightly less of a chance to hit that guy, and it's going to be very difficult to hit Astarion, as I'm about to showcase you right now. As you can see, 60% it's going to be diminished to 55% with Gale, and nearly impossible with Astarion because Astarion has lots and lots of dexterity. And then finally, about spellcasting, we need to have in mind concentration. Concentration, what it's going to do is that there's going to be some sustained spells. That is why usually your spellcasters should always be on the back lines on the battlefield, because they are not only going to be dealing ranged damage, they are also going to have sometimes concentration spells, like for example Bless right here. And this is one of the biggest mistakes that you can make if you're a new player. Just cast the Bless on your party and believe that just because you cast it, you are immediately free out of the bless. No, the bless needs to be maintained. The bless needs concentration to be active. And if somebody hits you while you are in the midst of battle, you are going to have to do a saving throw to maintain that concentration. That is why it's so important for clerics to have high armor class, because most of the cases they are going to be casting spells and buffs for the party, and if they have low armor class, they are usually going to get they're going to have a bad time, and if they have a bad time, they're going to be losing concentration, and that is no bueno for you, compadre. It is very important for you to always maintain this concentration. Again, you're going to lose it when the enemy hits you, because you're going to have to do a saving throw. You might bypass the saving throw for concentration, but you might not, and that is going to be a bummer. Let's talk about the spell slots, and I have a different video about this. We're not going to dwell too much into how do I calculate the spell slot that I am going to have for my characters, but essentially if you press K, your keyboard, it is not going to be as important to level up properly a caster. Hey, I get it, right? I said not as important. It is important to level up your cleric. It is important the choices that you are going to get, but mostly they are going to receive new spells when they level up, and you can get access to all of those new spells right here in this slot. The thing is that you have to use the previous knowledge that I just taught you, that I just showed you, to be able to decide which spells do I want to use? What are the spells that I want to use to be efficient? All of the previous knowledge that I taught you, this is how you should be choosing which spells are you going to have prepared, and you can prepare all of the spells that you want to at your heart's content. You can play around with this as you want to at your leisure, and you're always going to have the chance to move them around here and there, and you don't necessarily need to go back to the camp. There's always going to be this option available to you. What you are going to be needing the camp for is going to be resting to gain uses for those spells, and then again, that's the difference between cantrips. Cantrips, you are going to be able to use them whenever you want to, however you want to. If you want to spell if you want to spam these spells, you can. There's no limit about how many cantrips can you cast during the battlefield. On the other hand, we have the spell slots of the characters. And then again, these are going to be different for the different types of magic spellcasters that you are going to have. But essentially, there's going to be higher tiers that you're going to be unlocking as you level up. And if you have a high damaging spell that you have at level 1, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be one better at higher levels, because you can scale that spell with using spell slots. So, for example, just to give a quick example right here, I have my guiding bolts. I have prepared my guiding bolt. My guiding bolt is going to be a level 1 evocation spell, but when I cast it, I can decide whether if I am going to be using a 1, 2, 3 as I level up. I'm going to get new spell slots for new tiers of damage. Each tier of damage, it's going to add 1 dice of 6 for this specific spell. There's going to be variation for the different spells that you are going to have, but this is some other means that you can increase the damage of your spellcaster. So if I cast the little one, I am going to be using 4 dice of 6 damage, leading up to 24 damage probably. If I cast a level 2, it's going to be 30 damage, because it's going to add 1 dice of 6. So, as you can see, it's going to be 30 damage. At level 3, I am going to get an extra dice, which is going to sum up for a total of 36 damage, as you can see right here. Alright, so that is one mean of being able to increase my damage, but there's also different means, like I said, like the aforementioned. We have wisdom, and the main stat that your class is going to be using, which is going to be receiving bonuses from the ability scores. And if you get your main stat, like for example, if I would be using wisdom at level 30, I would get plus 10 to my modifiers, meaning that I am going to get modifiers on my spell casting and whatnot, all that kind of different sweetness, beautiful sweetness. But also, why on earth should I be using a weapon with a caster? Do I need to use a weapon for a caster? As you were able to see all during the showcase, I wasn't really using a weapon, and it doesn't really impact how much damage do I deal with my spells, because if I equip a weapon for my class right here, the probability is still the same. Does that mean that I shouldn't be equipping weapons for my casters? Not necessarily, but you should be on the lookout for magic weapons like this one that you are seeing on the screen right now, because this one, for example, adds extra dice of damage to the spells that you cast. So some magic weapons are going to be adding damage to melee dice, and also for spell casting dice. So that is something that you need to have in mind. Just to have in mind, pardon the redundancy, that the weapon in itself is not going to be doing anything. And finally, some little extra tips that you can do to increase the damage that you deal, the overall effectiveness that you're going to have in the battlefield. Some spells are going to have a range, and if you use them close range, you are going to get a disadvantage of being too close. And a disadvantage basically means that you roll 2 dice, and the lowest number, that is the one that is going to be counting. So if I get away, I'm going to get my basic cast again. On the other hand, there's also spells that are designed for close range, like this one for example. This spell is designed to be cast at 5 meters, and if I cast this spell at 5 meters, I'm going to be able to be more effective and not miss on my attacks. But there's also advantages that you can get on the battlefield, like for example, if you were on a higher grounds, that would give you an advantage, or well, not advantage, it would just give you the bonus, the ability check bonus of being on high ground. As you can see, now I have 85% of chance of hitting Gale instead of having 75% of chance of hitting Gale. But there's also even more that I can do, and this is why you should also be using stealth with your caster classes. You should always be tactical about all of this kind of stuff. Not only because Asterion is the rogue, he's the only one that he should be using stealth. I also want to be a stealthy class with my casters, because when I attack from stealth, I'm going to receive an advantage from hiding. And an advantage roll means that you get to roll 2 dice of attack chance, hit chance, and the highest one, that is the one that is going to be counting towards you being able to hit the enemy or not. So right now I have 98% chance of being able to hit Gale with my spell, which is going to be amazing, and it's always going to be chef's kiss, a treat. And I think that I have covered everything. I know that this is probably a long video, but this is some knowledge that you need to have. Remember that knowledge is a weapon. And the more you are versed into the knowledge of being able to be a proper spellcaster, the more you're going to have the chance to become a nuclear weapon with your casters. Do remember that we didn't mention about meta magic and eldritch magic and whatnot, so there's a whole bunch of different things that I didn't cover in this video, but this is just going to give you a basic idea, in between like a basic and medium idea of how to get the most out of the spells that you are going to have. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, if not also today, you're a gorgeous and beautiful person, you are indeed a gorgeous and beautiful person. I will be seeing you goddamn gorgeous and beautiful people in the next one. A beautiful day, and goodbye.